This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. For those that are curious, we arrived safely in Nashville and have settled into life here. So let's get into this next episode. You're listening to episode 46, Bruce Cleland. Bruce Cleland was born on March 31st, 1954, and grew up in California in a middle-upper-class existence. He graduated from South Pasadena High School in the summer of 1972 and went to Harvey Mudd College in Claremont. Bruce earned his bachelor's degree of science in 1976, and he immediately went to graduate school, where he graduated from Stanford with his master's degree in 1978. Even though Bruce grew up in a life of abundance and had a high-paying job as a software developer for a Redondo Beach company, he was frugal. Some of his friends would even call him tight. He rarely spent money he didn't have to, and he drove around in an older used car when he could have easily afforded something nicer. Bruce was not great in social settings, especially around women. He always lacked experience and self-assurance, and he never landed a girlfriend, even during college. Instead of trying to find a significant other, Bruce shared a close relationship with his family and spent a lot of time with them. It wouldn't be unusual for Bruce to spend the weekend with his dad, going to an air show or seeing a football game. If Bruce was someone who was well off and low-key, then Rebecca Salcedo was about as opposite as it could get. Rebecca had a blue-collar upbringing in Maywood, California. She enjoyed being the center of attention. Rebecca went through periods of time where she partied a lot and was seemingly happy. But bouts of depression broke this up, and she also attempted suicide a few times. She didn't go to high school, she never worked full-time jobs, and often used men to pay her way through life. In early 1991, Rebecca was arrested and went to jail on drug charges. They convicted her of possession of cocaine and intention to sell, which resulted in a 3-year sentence in Valley State Prison in California. In prison, Rebecca's mornings were full of nausea and vomiting. She was astonished to learn that she was pregnant and didn't know who the father was, since she had been with several men during that time. Her son was born in prison on October 22, 1991, and Rebecca's family members raised the child until she was released after serving 18 months of her sentence. Even though Rebecca had dated lots of men, she also dated women. After she left prison, she moved in with a female ex-cop, and even tattooed her girlfriend's name on her body. While Rebecca might have finally felt a sense of stability during this time, in 1994, her mother killed herself. Rebecca dealt with her mother's death by swallowing a handful of pills. However, some close to Rebecca questioned her suicide attempt and thought it was more of a cry for help. Rebecca started chasing men around again, so her girlfriend kicked her out. She took a job selling spices and moved forward with her life. In December 1995, Rebecca was at a Santa Fe Springs swap meet selling spices when Bruce Cleland fought his shyness and worked up the courage to converse with this woman who was 15 years his junior. Bruce was taken with the younger woman almost immediately. Rebecca heaped a lot of attention on Bruce, which was something he had never experienced before. They quickly started dating, and Bruce brought up his inexperience. Rebecca tried to reassure him it was okay, but she said they needed to get married before they had sex. At this point, they had only been together 1 week. Even though Bruce was so taken with her, he tried to hold off because it was too soon to consider marriage. 6 months later, in June 1996, his sister passed away from cancer at age 45. This event had a large impact on Bruce, and he decided that life was too precious and short. He asked Rebecca to marry him, and she eagerly accepted his proposal. They decided on a wedding date in January 1997. The engagement surprised Bruce's parents, especially since their family had been through a lot that summer, and they had reservations about the situation. But they were happy for their son and took Rebecca dress shopping. Bruce thought Rebecca was the love of his life and didn't realize how much she was into his six-figure salary. She told her friends that Bruce did very well for himself, and her plan was to marry him, have a kid, divorce him, collect child support, and she would be set for life. Rebecca's lifestyle changed drastically after meeting Bruce, and his previously frugal lifestyle changed as well. He paid for trips to Mexico and Australia. He bought her diamond rings, a car, a boat, a jacuzzi, furniture, lip injections, a nose job, and breast augmentation surgery. Rebecca had unrestricted use of Bruce's credit cards. Unbeknownst to Bruce's family, Rebecca persuaded him to get married earlier and said they needed to be married before they purchased a home so her name could be on the deed. The couple was married in a secret civil ceremony in October 1996. Bruce bought her a 3,200 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home on Colima Road in Whittier, California, just outside of Los Angeles. Bruce moved in with his parents as he waited for their ceremonial church wedding to take place that January. Rebecca was seeing other people during this time, and she made Bruce call her to get permission before he could stop by their home. Bruce and Rebecca were married in a large church ceremony in San Marino on January 18, 1997. By then, Rebecca's complaints were piling up. She said Bruce was clueless in the bedroom. Instead of having a normal honeymoon in Hawaii, Rebecca started making plans to see other men the moment she returned home. Bruce and Rebecca only made it a few months before she kicked him out of their house, and he moved back in with his parents. Her cousin, Alvaro Quesada, moved in the house with her. They were seen being affectionate, and their relationship was more than platonic. Rebecca was partying a lot and sleeping with anyone except Bruce. In June 1997, Bruce had given up on his marriage, even though he wanted it to work so badly. He even asked Rebecca to go to counseling. She wanted him to sign an agreement where she would live in their house and he would pay the mortgage and give her spending money too. Even though Bruce was still love-struck over Rebecca, he did not sign the separation agreement. She even threatened him, promising that she would tell everyone he molested her son. Bruce hit his breaking point and consulted with his parents, who helped him find a lawyer. Ron Ziff was an attorney based out of Pasadena, and he assured the Clelands that Rebecca would not be entitled to half of Bruce's assets because their marriage was so short. She would not really have a claim to the house, and he might owe her some of his retirement money, but only from the start of their marriage through the date of their separation. Rebecca might get 1 to 2 months' worth of spousal support. Ron recommended Bruce put his assets under the name of someone he trusted, and that would help block Rebecca's access to the funds she was no longer entitled to. Even after meeting with the lawyer, Bruce still wanted to be with Rebecca. On July 25, 1997, Bruce sat in his parents' house and told them not to expect him for dinner. Rebecca pleaded with Bruce to give her one last chance, so he was going to meet with her and they were going to talk about their problems. Bruce and Rebecca had dinner that night in Boyle Heights, and afterward went to Rebecca's uncle's home for a few drinks. Her uncle, Arturo Quesada, was the father of Jose and Alvaro Quesada, who were Rebecca's cousins. Alvaro was the relative that moved in with her when she kicked Bruce out. Rebecca and Bruce left her uncle's at 1 a.m. and headed back to their home. She pulled over at the corner of Beswick and Concord, right before the ramp to the Santa Ana Freeway, which had been closed because of construction. Rebecca looked at her car dash, and a warning light came on, which indicated the back door of the SUV was open. She got out of the car to shut the back door and was knocked out. A man walked around the vehicle to the passenger door where Bruce was seated and shot him in the face. The bullet hit his lip and jaw, which gave Bruce the opportunity to open the car door, and he instinctively tried to escape. He was shot once in the back and twice in the head. Some neighbors in the area both heard the gunshots and saw a man running away. Then they saw a car racing away from the crime scene. A cab driver drove by Rebecca's car and saw that there was trouble. He found Rebecca laying on the ground unconscious. Neighbors wandered over to the car, and the cabbie told them he'd called the police. This was when Rebecca sat up and came to. When law enforcement arrived, Rebecca's car was still running, and 43-year-old Bruce Cleland was dead, laying face down on someone's driveway. Rebecca had not checked on Bruce or asked about him. She told police that her diamond ring was taken. Detectives were immediately suspicious. During a carjacking, robbers will take the car and any personal possessions of value. They also don't take the time to run after victims and shoot them in the street. Law enforcement believed the person who shot Bruce was already waiting for him. Police took Rebecca to the station for questioning. Her demeanor really didn't match the event she just experienced, and they described her as being relaxed, uninterested, and lackadaisical. When questioned, Rebecca said that someone had carjacked them. She lost consciousness, and when she woke up, her husband was dead. Her story wasn't adding up. They thought that the route she was driving back to their home made little sense. She had driven out of the way and ended up on a quiet residential street in a rough area of town where the highway to the on-ramp was closed. Rebecca's keys, purse, and cell phone were all found in the car, and she still had possession of the car, which doesn't fit the MO of a carjacker. Bruce's wallet was found on his body. When paramedics examined her, she had no evidence of a head injury. Rebecca's interview with police was brief, and she shut down additional questioning. During the next week, Rebecca quickly worked on her new financial situation. Bruce had a life insurance policy from his employer that paid out half of his annual salary. He had a private insurance policy for $517,000. He also had a life insurance policy which would pay the amount on Bruce's house if he passed away. Then there was also his work stock plan that was worth $196,000. There was one last $25,000 JC life insurance policy, which Rebecca had taken out and forged Bruce's name. With Rebecca's newfound wealth, she hired an attorney and did not speak to the police after her short interview. Even though investigators suspected Rebecca, they offered a $25,000 reward in October 1997 for any information that led to the arrest of Bruce Cleland's killer. Law enforcement was certain that Rebecca planned the murder, and her motive was Bruce's $1 million net worth. They believed her cousin Jose committed the actual murder, and her other cousin, Alvaro, drove the getaway car. Rebecca paid Alvaro $500 after the murder, and they continued living in the Cleland's Whittier home together. Authorities investigated some of the insurance policies that had been taken out on Bruce, and they uncovered that Rebecca asked family members if they would find someone to kill Bruce. This led to the discovery that accomplices were involved. Police got a warrant and searched Rebecca's home, since they received a tip that she still had her purportedly stolen wedding ring. They found it on her hand and felt that their case against Rebecca, Jose, and Alvaro was strong enough to take to court. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Thank you to Best Fiends for sponsoring this episode of Beyond Contempt True Crime, even though I'm a little bit stuck and can't seem to break into the 600 levels. But hey, I've never been on that high of a level before with anything in my life, so don't worry, I'll keep at it. I like to sneak a few extra games in when I need to take a break, especially from watching too many true crime TikToks, which is like my new favorite thing. Best Fiends is endless fun with thousands of levels to play and countless cute characters to collect. It's a casual game that you play on your phone, and you don't even need to be tethered to Wi-Fi because you can play it without an internet connection, which is great for me because my internet provider sometimes drops the ball. The challenging levels will help you maintain your A game and will keep your noodle sharp. More importantly, I know you will enjoy this game, so download Best Fiends, free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. Now, back to the show. Bruce's murder had taken place on July 26, 1997, and 28-year-old Rebecca Cleland was finally arrested on February 17, 1998. They placed Rebecca in the back of a cop car in a parking lot near Interstate 605. Her cousin, Jose Quesada, was separately arrested, and they drove him to the parking lot where Rebecca was sitting. Detectives moved him into the same cop car as Rebecca, and they left them alone to see if they would talk. Their conversation was secretly recorded, of course. 15 minutes elapsed, and the pair really didn't talk to each other than initially saying hello. Later, detectives questioned Jose and asked if he knew the woman, and he said that he didn't know her. When Rebecca was asked if she knew who the man was, she admitted it was her cousin. District Attorney Craig Hum said Rebecca was evil and took advantage of Bruce. Their relationship was predicated on his money. This was a cold and calculated murder. Rebecca's lawyer claimed she did not commit the crime. She did not know who committed the murder, and also that she had completely cooperated with law enforcement. Losing Bruce devastated his parents, especially since they just lost their daughter too. Bruce's family was relieved by the arrests because they wanted justice for Bruce. His mom, Theda, knew that this wouldn't bring him back, but it went a long way to lessen her pain. During the trial in summer 2000, the prosecution showed Alvaro Quesada and Rebecca Cleland were in constant communication on the night of the murder. Cell phone records showed the pair had 11 calls leading up to the shooting. Rebecca and Bruce had been at her Uncle Arturo's house, having drinks, and Alvaro called the house several times between 12:35 and 12:49 a.m. Rebecca had placed calls to Alvaro between 1 and 1:01 a.m. Cell tower data showed that Alvaro was close to the location when Bruce was killed. One argument the prosecution used at trial was since Jose and Rebecca sat in silence in the back of the cop car during their arrests, this was evidence of their guilt. The case was mostly circumstantial, but there were a few witness identifications that determined Jose was the person who committed the murder. Rebecca's sister said she asked her for help finding a hitman to take out Bruce. When the sister refused to help, Rebecca threatened her. The jury agreed with the prosecution and found Rebecca to be unlikable. She and her cousins, Jose and Alvaro, were convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, with special allegations they had committed the murder for financial gain while laying in wait. They were sentenced to life in prison without parole. 3 years later, in 2003, the 2nd District Court of Appeals overturned Rebecca and Jose Quesada's convictions. 3 years later, in 2003, the 2nd District Court of Appeals overturned Rebecca Cleland and Jose Quesada's convictions. Their Fifth Amendment rights were violated when the prosecution said their silence in the back of the cop car was evidence of their guilt. When Rebecca and Jose didn't talk, they drove Jose to the police station. Investigators asked if he knew the woman sitting next to him in the police car. The officer originally testified in court that Jose said he didn't know who she was. Later on, the testimony slightly shifted to Jose said he'd never seen her before. Jose Quesada and his defense team lodged an objection that this violated his right to remain silent. The prosecution said that the silence they exercised in the back of the cop car spoke volumes about their guilt. And it was nonsense that Jose didn't know she was his cousin. The prosecutor said the pair feared that law enforcement was listening and therefore stayed silent. When the court looked at the evidence, they said that it indeed violated his Fifth Amendment rights because he had not been Mirandized. Asking him to identify Rebecca Cleland was not a legitimate method and was only used to collect an incriminating statement. Using their silence as evidence of guilt violated their rights, and they should not be forced to be witnesses against themselves. The convictions of Jose Quesada and Rebecca Cleland were reversed. When this happened, Alvaro Quesada's lawyer felt that the reversal of Jose and Rebecca's convictions impacted his client's case. The lawyer thought that there wasn't enough evidence to uphold his client's conviction as well, but the charges against Alvaro Quesada were upheld by the court. Both Rebecca Cleland and Jose Quesada had new lawyers for their upcoming trial. In March 2005, Jose Quesada's team filed a motion to uncouple their client's trial from Rebecca Cleland. They were informed that Rebecca's team would take another angle with her defense. She would claim that she had seen Jose kill Bruce and had not been aware of any prior murder planning. The court denied the motion for separate trials. Rebecca Cleland's retrial took place in 2006. Her defense team said she went to the murder location and expected that her cousins would confront Bruce over sexual advances that she claimed he made towards their father, Arturo Quesada. Rebecca claimed she was shocked when she saw Jose kill her husband. She panicked and didn't tell the truth. Rebecca then made up a story about the carjacking and being knocked out. The defense acknowledged she had indeed purchased life insurance policies, but they were with Bruce's blessing. The defense acknowledged she had indeed purchased life insurance policies, but they were with Bruce's blessing. Cleland's sister testified against her again and said Rebecca had asked for help with finding someone to kill Bruce. The defense claimed this allegation was the only evidence presented against Rebecca, and her sister was both a liar and hated her. Cleland did not testify at her trial. Jose again petitioned for a mistrial, which was granted. They found Rebecca Cleland guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder with the special allegation of murder for profit and lying in wait. She received the same sentence of life without parole. Jose's retrial took place on January 12, 2007. There were a few witnesses who had tied Jose to Bruce's murder. Two of the witnesses said they saw Jose running away from the crime scene. One did not see his face and had not been wearing her glasses. She was only able to generically describe his build. A second witness had a weak identification of Jose, where she could not tell the police his race and wasn't able to accurately describe his age or build. She picked him out of a photo lineup, but was not really sure of her photo selection. The last witness was a drug dealer and a paid informant who said Jose tried to buy a gun from him because he had to perform a hit on someone. Jose's defense team tried to discredit some of the witnesses by claiming mistaken identity and also some of them lacking credibility. The jury convicted Jose Quesada on conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, along with the special allegations of murder for profit and lying in wait. All three defendants remain behind bars. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please visit beyondcontemptpodcast.com for the links to the sources and music used in this episode. Research, writing, editing, audio production, and sound design were performed by me, Renee. If you like the show, please leave me a positive review in Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much, everyone.